On July 21st, 2023, while everybody else was already out at the theaters, I was out of town with my grandmother getting my car fixed. I couldn't wait to get home. I had been waiting for this day for almost a year. We were out all day and we did have a great time, but still, I couldn't stop thinking about what was awaiting me when we got back. On the way home after we had gotten the car fixed and parted ways, I totaled my car. So, all of that ended up being for nothing. That would have been a pretty big problem if I needed the car to drive to the theater, but if you've read the title, you can probably guess that neither of those movies were what had me so giddy. I had been waiting for Pikmin 4. This game. If it weren't for Tears of the Kingdom coming out 2 months prior, this might have been my most heavily anticipated game of all time. Ever since I had fallen in love with Pikmin 3 when it came to the Switch 3 years prior, I had been eagerly awaiting another entry in the series. No other Nintendo franchise, or even video game franchise in general, had ever clicked with me to the same extent that Pikmin did. So to find out that the biggest, most beautiful Pikmin game ever was coming to the Switch after the over 10-year wait since the last game, it's easy to say that I was over the moon. Every now and then I go back and watch that Arlo reaction just to relive that moment.
Where Miyamoto just keeps talking about Pikmin Bloom and I don't know if it's gonna lead to something else, but what's it gonna be? What's it gonna be?
Yeah, I'm not ashamed to admit that that clip still makes me tear up every time. Anyways, I hope that does a good job kind of encapsulating the overwhelming anticipation leading up to this game. I mean, the community was so excited that we got Olimar on Times Square. The obvious question now is if after all of that, the game lived up to the hype. And the answer is, as far too often, a resounding, it's complicated. The story of Pikmin 4 is fine. The main character is a member of the Rescue Corps, and for the first time in series history is actually an original player character. Which I have to say probably wouldn't work nearly as well if this wasn't the most boring protagonist in series history, but whatever. You, along with this thing and the rest of the Corps, are tasked with finding and rescuing Olimar after they received his distress signal from PNF 404. There are some pretty cool lore implications throughout the main story, but all of that is undermined by what appears to be a complete retcon of the entire series history. The game opens with a short tutorial where you play as Olimar after he crash landed on the planet for the first time, but it's immediately clear that this isn't the same first time he crash landed that we witnessed in the first game. The first major difference is that he now has a weird dog-like companion named Moss. This completely undermines the central identity of Pikmin 1. Throughout that game persists an aura of dread, knowing what will happen to you if you aren't able to repair your ship in time. Intertwined with that, there's a constant theme of isolation. Every night after your time is up, you see an entry in Olimar's voyage log. While some of these are simple gameplay tutorials, many of them provide insight into where Olimar's head is at. He writes about how alone he feels and how much he misses his family. None of which was that important, I guess, because apparently he just had this fuck-ass dog with him the whole time. Don't get me wrong, I could not give less of a shit about the intricacies or the consistency of the fucking Pikmin lore. But I think there's a difference between poor characterization of the damn Pikmin captains and Mario 4 having a flashback to Mario 1 where they shoehorn in some dragon companion character who was supposedly there the whole time. I feel like there's pretty good justification for at least a little pause. Another thing you're likely to notice pretty quickly is, well, everything else. What is his house? Pikmin 1 very sparingly showed man-made structures, and the ones it did were pretty clearly aged. This house looks like the family just left for the grocery store 30 minutes ago. Why does it look like this? If it isn't supposed to be abandoned, then why is it infested like this? I'll get into the visual identity of the game a lot more later, but for now I'll just say that this disconnect is so baffling because I have no earthly idea what purpose it serves. Like, would it really have hurt to just have this be a different expedition? Why is a game called Pikmin 4 so determined to undermine the legacy of the franchise? Maybe if they had just rebooted the series and moved towards named installments instead of numbered ones, they wouldn't have had to go back and ruin the old Pikmin logos for the sake of consistency. Of course, along with Olimar, Louie is back and once again following the same arc for the third time in a row, where you get a good portion of the way through the game before he decides it's time to fuck shit up, resulting in some final act mix-up allowing the ending or the post-game to happen. Olimar and Louie aren't the only returning characters. Once you've rescued Olimar, the post-game begins, where your main objective is to rescue the 3 captains from Pikmin 3. I have my beef with a certain portion of the 3, but I guess it's cool to see them back. Wait, who the hell are you? Who the fuck is Don Bergman? Why did they do this? What was the point of including these characters at all if you're just gonna not include them? It's so frustrating watching them feign some vague interest in moving the series past its roots, while also desperately clinging to them as if losing their iron grip for even a second would result in immediate bankruptcy. These characters have some of the least established lore of anyone in the entire series. It would have mattered way less if their story got retconned. The only purpose of their inclusion seems to be that they just wanted to find a way to fuck up the established canon in a differenter and more fucked up way than they did with Olimar and Louie. I think this speaks to a real identity issue that kind of plagues the entire game. At its core, Pikmin 4 wants to have its cake and eat it too. The game wants to simultaneously be a best-of compilation of the series up to this point, but it also wants to ditch everything that came before it in service of building a new identity that is honestly pretty rarely executed on all that well. You know those big remakes that come out every once in a while where people see them and think, why did you put all this work in just to retread old ground? Why didn't you just use these assets to make a new game? Well, in a lot of ways, Pikmin 4 feels like that game. I have some pretty serious problems here, but before I get into that, I just want to say that Pikmin 4 is without a doubt one of the most beautiful video games ever made. When I first got my Switch 2, I played through the game again, and while it is unfortunately still locked at 30 FPS, the visuals rival and in some cases even exceed those of many native Switch 2 games. I'd love to go into all the little details like the lighting and how beautifully rendered all the treasures are, but I think for the most part I can leave it at like, just look at it. I would never say that this game looks bad, because it just doesn't. My issues are almost entirely with the way the world is designed. Somewhere at the core of Pikmin's message, somewhat with 1 and especially in 2, is the theme of if we were to disappear tomorrow, what would we leave behind? A question that the games never hesitate to answer. The only lasting remnants of what previously was is the waste of our never-ending consumption. You don't dig up human love and compassion or the impact that you made in your limited time on Earth on the people around you. You dig up Duracell batteries and 7-Up bottle caps. This is one of the single greatest uses of product placement in the history of media. Seeing these specific everyday objects that most people playing are likely to have at least some version of in their home draws a strong parallel between the post-apocalyptic future depicted in the game and the way we function as a society today. While these products are created and sold as consumable objects meant to be churned through and forgotten, the reality is that you can't just forget the impact of your consumption and expect the world to forget it too. These objects are meant to be used and thrown out so quickly and on such a regular basis that the impact of any individual one of them would represent barely a speck on the timeline of your life. The impact of these items consume vast portions of the timeline of humanity and of the world itself. And in Pikmin 4, none of that matters anymore. Every area in Pikmin 4 looks like it was abandoned 30 minutes ago. Obviously there was an element of this in the previous games, like how most of the treasures in 2 looked nearly brand new. But in the case of that game, it's easy to read this as an intentional exaggeration of how long these items would last. The perfectly preserved items served a purpose in that game's environmental storytelling. In Pikmin 4 it just feels random, and honestly I find it to be constantly immersion breaking. The earlier games gave the illusion that they were set so far after humans had vanished that the question of where they went was almost irrelevant. But when I see this spotless house with working electricity or this clearly actively maintained garden, it doesn't just make you think about why everyone is missing. It pretty directly asks you to think about where they went. A question which inversely, this game very clearly has no intentions of answering. Those old games really felt like they were trying to say something. But like, what is the commentary here? House bad? Really? That's what we're doing? House bad? It's such a shame because this could have been such a good setup for a reboot of the franchise if they went further with the idea. Maybe they could have actually called attention to the strangeness of the scale and cleanliness of the structures you explore. Maybe a central component of the story could have been exploring the question of where the people who made these structures went. Maybe something did happen recently that would explain the absence of humans and other real-world creatures. The idea of a Pikmin game exploring the direct aftermath of the apocalyptic event that created the world we explore in Pikmin 1 through 3 could have been interesting. My best guess for why they went this direction is just that they thought that these new settings would be more fun to make, and honestly a part of me respects that. Despite whatever problems I may have with it, the strength of Pikmin 4's unique visual identity is undeniable. I just wish they actually tried to do something new with it like they pretty clearly wanted to, instead of just thoughtlessly creating this new setting and then trying to shoehorn all the existing characters and stories into it. Anyways, I guess we can talk about the actual game part of the game now. Like I alluded to earlier, Pikmin 4 brings a lot of new stuff to the table, but also brings back almost everything that's ever appeared in the entire series. If you've ever played the old games, then you'll pretty constantly be sitting up in your chair slightly when your favorite Glup Shittos appear on the screen. It's pretty fun to see a lot of these guys back, especially after how long it's been. A lot of these guys hadn't been in a game in almost 20 years. There are, however, a couple of pretty noticeable omissions, ranging from unfortunate to honestly kind of baffling. For a game that's so dead set on including every type even if they have no reason to be here, we'll get to that later, it's sad to see Boldman omitted. I'm not sure what purpose they would have served, but I wish they had figured something out. Weirdly, the Puffmen are gone as well. This didn't matter in the past because the Puffstool was gone also, but the Puffstool isn't gone this time. Now it only exists to be a worse version of its new variant, the Toxstool. This could potentially work, but the Puffstool doesn't appear until the final area of the game, so what was even the point of including it at all? One of this level's two main hazards is poison. Why didn't they just use the Toxstool here instead? Of course, most importantly, the Gatling Groink is gone. They forgot to put the Gatling Groink in the game. Nintendo, where's the Gatling Groink? I think one of Pikmin 4's greatest strengths is its sense of progression. You start the game weaker than you've probably ever been, other than having one slightly more powerful unit, which I'll get to in a minute. You start out with a maximum of 20 Pikmin, and you can get more by finding colorless onions called Firebugs. A lot of people seem to think that they did this to ease in newer players with lower starting unit counts, but I honestly don't think that's why they did it. This restriction is very consistent with a lot of other stuff in the game. They pared back your starting toolkit in basically every way they possibly could have, like making you start without Swarm or the Charge Whistle, or even the ability to see 2 feet in front of you in a cave. I think the more obvious reason they did this is just that they wanted you to have more room to grow. Everything you do in Pikmin 4 rewards you in a very tangible way, whether it's collecting resource piles to build bridges and buy upgrades for your character, or doing caves to find castaways and unlock upgrades for Oatchi, or finding Flarwick to upgrade your onion. They clearly wanted the scope of the things that you're capable of to constantly be expanding in new ways. Reducing the starting limit was just one of the many ways they accomplished that. Speaking of Oatchi, I guess now would be a pretty good time to talk about him. I actually really like him. It's clear that they took a lot of inspiration from hero units in more traditional RTSs. Oatchi is interesting because he's both the more powerful Pikmin and also this game's answer to a second captain. Oatchi is arguably the most infamous part of Pikmin 4, which is saying a lot because there's certainly no shortage of competition. What it seems to come down to for most people is his overwhelming power budget, especially late game. When it comes to that specifically, I do think I largely agree. Like most overpowered units in these games, the issue largely comes down to his combat ability. As the game progresses, Oatchi becomes incredibly strong. He has basically every overtuned combat ability in series history, along with a couple new ones. He has a crazy stun, crazy damage, and almost worse than any of that, if you land a mounted charge it sicks all of your Pikmin on the enemy at once, which almost always kills whatever you're fighting basically immediately. I think this is the most insidious one because with stuff like the damage and the stun, you actually need to earn those abilities. In my most recent playthrough, I didn't unlock the stun until like the last area of the base game, and I didn't unlock a damage upgrade of any kind until even later, because I focused all my points in productivity stuff like carry capacity and digging. You can launch your Pikmin with the charge from the moment you can first get on Oatchi, which is like day 2 or 3. I don't think I like Oatchi being able to charge at all, really. It causes so many problems and it's not even really all that fun to use. I think it says a lot that the most fun boss in the game is largely impossible to charge for most of the fight, and the openings you can have hard limits on how much damage you can do, so it doesn't even really matter. I would honestly much prefer just having the ability to charge Pikmin while mounted, because as it is, Oatchi's charge completely overrides the button. Oatchi's charge doesn't become fun to use until you unlock literally his last ability, which you unlock after finding 100% of castaways and purchasing every upgrade. Even then, once you unlock that ability, there's no opportunity to use it, since you have to effectively 100% most of the game to get it anyways. Unfortunately, considering his reputation, that is mostly where my criticism begins and ends. I love Oatchi as a productivity and traversal tool. Like I said earlier, when I played this game, I almost always focus my points on productivity stuff. Maybe I'm just a fucking ape, but I love seeing something I don't feel like expending units on and just sicking the dog on it and watching him take a 100-unit item or a buried treasure by himself. I think his productivity power is balanced well by the level design. The game is constantly finding ways to punish you for not having the dog with you, which I won't pretend doesn't have its own issues. It basically kills the multi-captain gameplay from the previous games. You can't ever really have them separated doing separate things because there are large swaths of the game that are gated by having Oatchi with you. Other than that, I think the game does a really good job of balancing incentives. Obviously you have this super strong unit that can handle a wide variety of tasks by himself, but you have to be careful. It's irresponsible to send Oatchi off whenever you want because around any corner could be a ledge that you need him to reach, or a body of water he would make more efficient to cross, or entire platforming challenges that are completely inaccessible without him. It encourages you to plan around how long you're going to be in any given place, and to think ahead about wherever you plan to go next. Anyways, if you've played Pikmin 4, you're probably about to put a hole through the screen waiting for me to bring up what is arguably the biggest gameplay change in series history. The new cursor. Previously, you had a cursor independent of your character that could be controlled one of two ways. Originally on the GameCube, you could move Olimar or Louie while keeping the cursor fully extended by tilting the control stick, with smaller movements allowing for more precise aiming. When they were ported to the Wii as part of the new Play Control series, they added Wii Remote and Nunchuck support, allowing you to freely move the cursor completely independent of your character's movement. This is by far my favorite control method and the only way that I'm willing to play 1 through 3. Pikmin 4 does not have a free cursor. It has a new cursor that's based on the classic control style, but now instead of being mostly player controlled, it now automatically locks on to anything you can interact with. This changes the fundamental gameplay loop pretty dramatically. What used to be a pretty involved process is now something that kind of just passively happens to you. It is definitely interesting. It streamlines the gameplay in a way that can be kind of fun sometimes. It makes me wonder if this is a remnant from when they were testing a Pikmin for the 3DS. I think something like this could have worked really well in a 3DS game or maybe even a mobile game. In Pikmin 4, it is pretty bad. It is very rare that I am not actively fighting the cursor in Pikmin 4. Especially after getting so used to the free cursor from the previous games, watching the one in this game constantly unpromptedly walk onto random shit behind me is a constant source of severe frustration. What's almost even worse is the new throwing restriction. If you're throwing Pikmin at an object, the game will actually stop you from throwing more Pikmin past its minimum carry limit. It actually just disables your throw button. I might actually hate this more than anything else in the entire game, even more than the lock-on. I can't tell you how many times I've sat there mashing the A button, begging the game, pleading for it to just let me throw more Pikmin while it just sits there awkwardly paused. Just let me throw them until I'm finished. Stop coming into my house and telling me how to play my own game. I'm an adult, goddammit, I know how to fucking count. The best part is the holy fusion of these mechanics when it drops these individual material pieces when you harvest something or break a wall, and it makes you either sit there and wait the full time for each piece individually or just jam your cursor and match the A button until the game decides that you're allowed to pick up another piece. I think the worst part is just the inconsistency. No matter how long you play or how experienced you are, you will never overcome these little moments of friction. Someone who's played the game for 100 hours can expect to struggle with cursor jank just about as often as someone playing the game for the first time. As good as it feels when everything clicks into place exactly how you expect it to, this system will never not be tainted by the inherent restrictions of its implementation. Now, I don't want to sit here and pretend like I don't understand why these limitations are here. Like I alluded to earlier, it's apparent that one of the core design principles of Pikmin 4 was a major streamlining of the gameplay. This has wide-reaching effects from the cursor limitations I've already talked about to other restricted or streamlined elements like the 3-type limit and the far more restricted multitasking. In a lot of ways, I respect this direction. It gives the game a very unique identity and game feel to the point where I crave playing it in a way that can never be quite satiated by the other games in the series. I think about if I would rather play 3 or 4 in a way that I almost never think about if I would rather play 3 or the first 2. I just think that they went a little too far with it. I think they could have smoothed out a lot of the moment-to-moment gameplay like this without removing so much of the game. Let's talk about that 3-type limit. I think a lot of people's takes on this kind of miss the forest for the trees. Like, is it annoying that you can only have 3 types out at a time? Like, sure, I guess, but that really isn't the issue here. There's rarely an instance where having more types out would be useful, because this game is built around the assumption that you will only ever have the 3 types it selects for you. 3 types that you will either already have or find immediately upon arriving. This, along with removing a good amount of general moment-to-moment depth, means that all the areas in this game are designed in a way where you could just blast through the whole thing 100% as soon as you get to it. Assuming you've also done this with all the previous areas. You probably don't even have to do all that much in the previous areas. I haven't really thought about the requirements all that much. This is a big deal because the previous games were all structured with light Metroidvania elements in mind, where you unlock new types in new areas, unlocking new pathways in old areas. This encouraged pushing through each area and progressing to the next as soon as possible. Very few things are as satisfying as those last few days where you get to churn through all the last treasures in the previous areas with all of your new Pikmin. It's fun to watch these levels open up in new ways, and it's really cool to get one last chance to revisit all of these places before the game ends. Going through each area one at a time before leaving forever feels hollow. It makes them feel less like different locales in this big place that you're exploring, and more like a linear set of levels that you're playing through. I will say though that the first area for most people will have to be revisited. The blue onion's in a hard to reach spot that requires a specific combination of upgrades to get back, meaning most people will likely spec out of the required path and have to come back later. I learned how to get it early on, like the first day of the demo coming out, and I've been doing it that way ever since, so I never really have to think about it. I would say this is one of the biggest casualties of Pikmin 4. Anyways, I want to talk about the actual Pikmin themselves now. As seems to be standard by this point, we got 2 new types, Ice and Glow Pikmin, which I'll talk about later. I think Ice Pikmin are fantastic. This extends beyond just Ice Pikmin, but I think one of the coolest ideas that they've been developing in modern Pikmin is the interplay of different types and water. First there were just blue Pikmin, whose entire gimmick is that they can walk through the death puddles sporadically placed throughout each map, but with Pikmin 3 they expanded water into what I think is now the coolest hazard in any of the games. Instead of just being a different kind of floor, water now heavily utilizes elevation. We now have these deep underwater explorable areas, and with this, blue Pikmin gain the ability to swim, meaning that they can reach items and enemies under the water, something that to this day only they are able to do. Well, at least something only this type of Pikmin is able to do. This is cool in its own, but my favorite part is the interplay with winged Pikmin. Winged Pikmin, as their name might suggest, can fly, which means that they can cross water, but more importantly, they can't swim, at least most of the time. I love being forced to think about which type would be better for each use case. Usually in these games, when you're presented with an obstacle, there's very rarely more than one answer. When you see a yellow gate, you use yellow Pikmin. When you see a fire geyser, you use red Pikmin. When you see a tough enemy, you use rock Pikmin because they made them all but invincible for some reason. With blues and pinks there arrive genuine internal dialogues and considerations as to which one is more fitting for the terrain they might encounter on their path. This is a little off topic, but I'm not sure where else to put this. What the hell happened to the pinks in this game? I think they still interact with water fine, but outside of that their AI is bafflingly terrible. It is so goddamn frustrating watching these fucking lobotomites pretend to not know how to fly straight. I think very few other parts of this game show as much active contempt for the player as winged Pikmin do. From ignoring obvious shortcuts to refusing to fly over gaps to orchestrating mafia-style executions of their coworkers. The winged Pikmin in this game are almost always worse than useless. Nowhere is this more obvious than in that one stage of the Sage Leaf Trials. Why the fuck do they have to walk a full lap around the damn stage to carry the onion to the ship? Do they hate you? Do they hate me? Anyways, all that is to say, Ice Pikmin expand the water idea even further. Ice Pikmin under no circumstance can carry items through water, but they can swim. Any body of water can be frozen by a number of Ice Pikmin, increasing with its size. When frozen, a body of water can be crossed by any type, meaning that you can expend a portion of your very limited units, especially in the early game, to allow easier transportation across bodies of water, opening shorter paths and access to otherwise inaccessible areas. It's probably the most interesting ability they've ever given a Pikmin. It's not the same mostly lock and key approach they've done with a lot of previous types. It fundamentally changes the way you think about the productivity of your Pikmin. I will say that this, along with a lot of other more technical aspects of how you engage with these mechanics, doesn't really matter that often in the overworld. It can be passively useful if you choose to think about it, but for the most part you only ever have to actually utilize this stuff in challenge mode stages, which was somewhat unfortunate before, but now these stages are actually integrated into the main game, and they're great, so there's still plenty of opportunities to take advantage of their unique abilities. While I do think that their main utility is balanced very well, I also agree that their utility in battle is a bit much. You can use them to freeze any enemy in place for a pretty long time, which on top of Oatchi's pretty strong stun leads to a lot of very one-sided battles in the late game. This extends even to the part that I actually like. There are entire boss encounters that are ruined by the ability to just freeze the water they're standing in and just hitting them until they die. I also think frozen enemies dropping nectar on death is pretty bewildering. It seems like they thought that replacing the body with something else so that you couldn't use it to increase your numbers was a nerf, when in most cases it's actually more useful than the body would have been. If you give even the slightest shit about working to increase your numbers, you will end up with well over 100 of any given type within like the first day of having their onion. On the other hand, Pikmin lose their flowers all the time. This game already showers you with nectar and it's almost always useful. What's even worse is that sometimes they drop straight up entire charges of spicy spray. I actually want to take a bit of a detour and talk about the spicy spray because holy shit, what were they thinking? For all the shit people give Oatchi for ruining the balance, I think this stuff is far worse. Forget Oatchi, this shit is demonic. It is quite literally a one-shot button for any enemy in the entire goddamn game. It's already an insanely overtuned mechanic, but I think what's almost worse is how they let you automate collection. I think it makes sense that Pikmin will automatically walk back and forth between things like material piles or construction sites, but automating berries is such an unfathomable balance decision. You can set aside like 10 Pikmin for 5 to 10 of the 40 to 50 days of this game and have more spray than you could ever conceivably need. I think all they needed to do to make spray a more thoughtful mechanic is make you harvest it manually every time. Maybe also make it a little less powerful, but even that feels like it would be way less necessary if you couldn't just fucking stockpile 50 charges within 4 seconds of work at the start of a couple of days. It sucks even more because collecting this stuff is the most fun way to play. Nothing in these games feels better than optimizing how your Pikmin are being allocated, and setting 10 Pikmin to collect one-shot buttons is pretty objectively the most optimal way to play. On top of being more balanced, it would also just be more fun. Taking little detours to collect berries would be a fun strategic decision that they have just stripped away from us for no reason. Hey, finally a part of the game that's worse than 2, am I right, guys? Yeah, they're bad. They aren't like aggressively bad, but it's pretty rare that they do literally anything interesting. Which sucks because these smaller scope finely crafted spaces should be where the game gets to really explore the mechanical limits of the engine. The best case scenario for a cave in this game is that it's like pretty fun, and the far more common and expected scenario is that it's mildly tedious. I'm rarely excited to go into a cave in this game. The best thing I can say about them is that they do, at least for me, overcome the Pikmin 2 issue of entering caves actively stunting the game. In that game, getting in and out of caves feels really arduous, but in Pikmin 4 it in a lot of ways is actually kind of liberating. Being able to choose your Pikmin when you enter and exit caves leaves a lot of room for thoughtful decision making, but I recognize that's very superficial. I'm certainly no fan of Pikmin 2 or especially its caves, but it's impossible to deny that the caves in that game are way more thoughtfully crafted and at least serve a purpose. I think the main reason I don't hold that much resentment towards the caves in 4 is because like most things in the game, the rewards are really worthwhile. The main collectibles in caves are treasures and castaways, with other things like Firebugs being more rare finds. Treasures are cool I guess, but the big one is the castaways. These are the guys I mentioned earlier. They give you currency to unlock various upgrades for Oatchi. However, there are other ways to find castaways. When I think of Pikmin 4, I think of these challenge stages, because they're by far the best part of the game. 3 had some great stages too, but it can be hard to find the motivation to do them because they're segregated off in their own little part of the main menu, and once you've gotten the platinum medals once, there's very little reason to return to them. Pikmin 4's stages, on the other hand, are also incredible, but now they've actually been integrated into the main game. In the overworld, you'll find a new cave variant with a different colored lid, along with one of 2 NPC types standing outside. The first of which is Olimar, who you'll find outside of battle stages. I liked these a lot on my first playthrough, but honestly my opinion of them kind of worsens on every subsequent one. I found their difficulty to be very satisfying at first, with most of them taking me several tries to platinum, which I should say is how you should be doing these. I think you lose a lot of how brilliantly crafted a lot of these stages are if you don't platinum them. Anyways, the difficulty falloff for these stages is pretty tremendous on replays, to the point where I was consistently getting the required 100 point lead on the first try every time, including on the final one. Also, I do get the idea, but having to play in a split screen is also really annoying. I think they should have gone for a smaller picture-in-picture window or something, reserving the split screen for actual multiplayer. The other NPC type is a Leafling, who will make you do a Pikmin 3 treasure mode style challenge stage in exchange for coming back with you. These stages are almost across the board truly excellent. This is where the game truly shines. In these levels you're tasked with collecting every treasure and body within a set time limit. Nowhere else does the game so expertly encourage you to explore the limits of what you're capable of. Every element of the game these stages touch is executed at its best here. For instance, the Ice Pikmin. Sure, you can already use them for minor productivity bonuses here and there, but here the game fully expects you to always be thinking strategically about where they're stationed at any given time. Also, remember how overtuned they are in combat? Well, these stages directly address that issue. If you kill an enemy while it's frozen, you lose the body, making it impossible to get a perfect score. You might just think, well, what does that matter? You can just wait to last hit them until after they freeze. But like I said earlier, these stages are timed. You never want to waste time sitting around doing nothing. It encourages you to either avoid fighting with them entirely or to fight with them in such a way that the bar never completely fills. I think this restriction all but completely balances them. Another thing they improve is flowers. I think a lot of cave designs are hurt by never knowing exactly how much of a given type you started with or currently have. Having the purple and white onions earlier than the game expects makes a lot of endgame cave flower placements feel really awkward and unnecessary, to the point where it feels like it's encouraging you to waste other more scarce unrenewable types in order to inflate their numbers, even when you enter the cave with more than 30 of them. It kind of feels like the game is presenting you with constant panic buttons, because they feel like they can never be confident that you can finish the level with your current loadout. On the other hand, challenge stages always know exactly how many Pikmin you started with and how many of each type you could theoretically get. And because of this, the flower placements feel much more cohesive and intentional. Things like which type you should sacrifice and when become much more prominent considerations. My love for these stages is immeasurable. If they were ever to add more content to this game, this is the first place I would want it to be. One unfortunate side effect of these stages being in the campaign is that this game doesn't actually have side content of any kind. On one hand, it's cool that every single piece of content in this game is, I would say, pretty beautifully integrated into the campaign, but it does kind of suck not having anything. No bingo battle, or even something new. It would be cool to have some kind of permanent side mode to return to, maybe something score chasey like Pikmin 1. Because this game is like 20 hours long and possibly double that in earlier playthroughs. It can be hard to just jump in and play when it's such a massive commitment, so seeing something shorter and more replayable would have been cool to see. Anyways, finishing a challenger battle stage will give you a Leafling, which can be converted into a castaway and thus skill points by completing a night mission. These are a mixed bag. I really like the idea. I almost think something like this could be expanded into exactly what I was just asking for earlier. Basically, these missions are like a wave-based tower defense kind of thing. The most notable part of them is that they feature a new type called Glow Pikmin. These are exclusive to night stages, kind of, and are basically god units. They can do everything any other type can do except for hyper-specific abilities like freezing things and stomping. They can fly, they're immune to every standard hazard type, and on top of all of that, they have a new ability where you can hold down the charge button to ball them up and stick them all at once in something, freezing every enemy in the vicinity for a couple of seconds. I assume increasing based on how many you have. There's honestly not a whole lot to say about these guys. I like their designs, but for the most part they're a means to an end. They exist largely only to brute force through these stages specifically. Onto the stages themselves, they're just okay. Basically, your objective is to defend your home base or bases from increasingly large waves of enemies, and to do so you'll have to explore the level to find glow pellets on the ground and by killing stronger enemies. It's fun to frantically search the pellets to increase your numbers as fast as possible, but a lot of the time it feels like it ends right when it starts to get satisfying. You push really hard to get a crazy mob of guys as soon as you can, but right when you finally reach a point where you feel powerful, it always just ends before you get to leverage it in any meaningful way. I feel like the power fantasy angle of this mode is the strongest part, but it feels like it really doesn't want to push that idea very far. Like, you don't have to keep dropping sets of 3 one-shottable bowlboards, get a little fucked up with it. Towards the end they start dropping smoky progs on you pretty often, but it's always just 1 or 2 and never at the same time. Drop like 3 of these guys on me at once, who cares? It's not like you have to worry about killing too many of my units, you can just restart the level. They never seem to want to commit to making these levels very hard or very interesting. Worst of every world. When you beat the game and save Olimar, he'll offer to tell you the story of his crash landing. You play through his story in the form of a pseudo-remake of Pikmin 1. The first thing that I have to say is that I wish Moss wasn't here. Obviously for the reasons I talked about earlier, but that's actually not what I'm talking about. We have the whole game to play with the dog. It would be nice if in at least this mode in particular, you got a chance to just play normally with a single captain. You do start without Moss, and you don't get him until the second area, but to be honest, I wish they had just saved her for the 4th to line up with the intro. Getting those opening moments without her almost makes it even worse, because it's such a fun mix-up only to immediately get the rug pulled out from under you to return to the status quo. It makes starting with Swarm feel a lot more pointless. This would have largely been the only opportunity to use it. I guess you don't technically start with Swarm, but that does bring up a cool aspect of this mode. You get upgrades from finding ship parts again, one of the first being Swarm. Something unfortunate about the ship parts though is that they're all so beautifully rendered that it kinda sucks how many of them are reused, and how many of the original pieces from Pikmin 1 are missing. It would have been cool to see all of them. I think the best part of this mode is just that it's so late in the game. It's nice to get an opportunity to start over. By this point in the game you probably have close to or more than 100 of every type, and over 1,000 in total. So it's cool to be stripped back down to nothing one last time. Another thing is that they brought back backtracking. Like I said earlier in the main game, there's rarely a reason to push forward if you haven't completed an area yet, but Shipwreck Tale brings back the concept of gating progression based on unlocks in later areas, and I think it's another really fun mix-up. Since the story takes place before the main game, you get the chance to see these areas before the protagonist got there, just like with the deluxe content in Pikmin 3. They don't do anything crazy with this, but the little they do goes a long way. The most notable change is that just like how Serene Shore's water level changes in the base game at the halfway point of a day, almost across the board every area similarly has its water level lowered. The flammable straw from Giant's Hearth also makes a few earlier appearances. I like this because its random arrival in the 5th area of the game feels pretty abrupt, so it's neat to get an actual reason why they were missing before that point. Another thing is that there are 2 long legs in the overworld throughout the course of this mode. Something about seeing these big hulking enemies in the distance is really cool. It's one of those moments that really justifies the new camera and controls for me. I also really like that there are no caves of any kind. I love how you could just kinda blast through the whole thing in like 2 hours without having to constantly stop to do dungeons. It would have been cool to see a new map screen. I kinda wish they retooled the UI to fall more in line with the maps from 1 and 2. As it is, just getting thrown into the pretty boring level select after every day feels kinda soulless. It fits well enough for the base game, but here it can feel kinda jarring. Anyways, Shipwreck Tale does not break the trend of meaningfully rewarding you for everything that you do. Finding all 30 ship parts ends the mode and results in Olimar telling you about a cave you found somewhere at the base. Inside you'll find the hardest content the game has to offer. I'm a pretty big fan of the Sage Leaf Trials. It's a 10-layer cave composed entirely of challenge stages. All of them are remixed layouts of previous stages, but that doesn't bother me because they're still some of the best levels in the whole game, except for one of them. If you've played the game, you probably already know exactly which one I'm referring to. One Fell Jump is among the worst individual pieces of content in the entire game, hell, the entire series. It's genuinely bafflingly terrible. It's like when they were designing this level, not to say a lot of thought went into it, it doesn't actually feel very designed at all. They just forgot what game they were making. Like, you do realize this is Pikmin 4, right? The one where the cursor flies around wherever it wants? This stage literally just doesn't function. This is the only part of the game I would describe as outright broken. Zero redeeming qualities, and I think it's truly the only part of the game I would describe that way. Anyways, like I've already said, the rest is still pretty great. If you remember earlier when I said the challenge stages were all based on the treasure mission mode stages, these stages all actually have unique goals. There are more unique clear conditions, but for the most part the goal is almost always to reach the Sage Leaf, which is almost always done in a new way. He's usually locked behind some obstacle like a wall with the lowering condition or a construction site. Instead of the goal just being to collect every item, now it's stuff like finding all the materials to build the bridge or killing every enemy, or even this one that's just primarily a weird puzzle platforming challenge. It's not very deep or even really that hard, but I still think it's really cool. At stages 5 and 10, you will, for the first time in series history, find the white and purple onions respectively, the ultimate rewards for completing both the Shipwreck Tale and the trials. This is a really cool novelty, but to be honest, like most of the onions in this game, they don't serve much purpose. Outside of getting the gold bar, which I would say is a pretty solid use case, there isn't much reason to care about these. Overall, I don't have much to say about most of these. Most of what I said about the other challenge stages apply here, with these being largely the same if not a good amount better. In November of last year, Nintendo released a patch for the game, adding some light new content along with several new options addressing major criticisms. The first and most notable of which being the ability to disable the auto lock. This was pretty broken at first, but within a week they patched the game again, and from what I've seen, most people are happy with it now. Unfortunately, I can't say the same. Like I explained when I talked about the lock-on, the control scheme I prefer is always going to be the free Wii-style pointer. If they gave me that, maybe I would make the switch, but as it is, I vastly prefer playing with lock-on. I already don't like the standard GameCube control method, but combined with this game's new camera, it just never feels good. Like, don't get me wrong, the lock-on is still wildly inconsistent, but I would rather have a pretty good time most of the time, with occasional frustrating mishaps, over not having that much fun for basically the entire playthrough. This most recent playthrough, I never touched the option once. Granted, part of that was just that I wanted footage of the standard experience, but even if I was just playing casually, I don't think I would ever have touched it, outside of maybe that one level of the Sage Leaf Trials. At its core, this game was pretty clearly designed to be played with lock-on, which is again part of what makes that stage so frustrating. I'm happy for other people who for some reason want to play like this, but I'm probably never touching this option again. One of the most requested features behind toggling lock-on was New Game Plus. As I talked about earlier, one of this game's strongest elements is its sense of progression. Throughout the game, you get so many cool upgrades, and a lot of the coolest ones like Swarm and the Pluckathon are unlocked very close to 100% completion. For the longest time, the game was structured in a way where its coolest upgrades were also inherently its most disappointing ones, but in 1.1 they finally added it. Rollover is a new feature that lets you carry over skill points, gear upgrades, and all the onions you found to a brand new save file. It's basically perfect. I'll admit that I haven't ever completed a save file this way, but I did mess around a bit when the update dropped, and yeah, it's pretty cool. The only issue I have is that you start with 0 Oatchi abilities unlocked, which is in itself fine. I understand that some people might want to pick and choose what abilities they start with. The problem is how long it takes to go through and buy all of them again. I wish they let us buy upgrades in bulk, or even just let us start with them all again and add a menu option to toggle the abilities like you can with gear. Here's an unfortunate one. The new difficulty options. I don't have anything to say about relaxed mode. If that's how you want to play, that's your prerogative, I guess. Like they said in the trailers, it's probably pretty useful for taking pictures, so cool, whatever. I hate ultra spicy mode. Not just here, but in Pikmin 3 Deluxe too. It sucks because there are a lot of really cool changes that I would prefer to play with. I like stuff like Ice Pikmin evaporating instantly in fire and enemies overall being stronger. The thing I hate about it, and the thing that keeps me from ever playing it again, is the reduced daytimer and Pikmin limit. There is no day limit in this game, and there effectively isn't one in Pikmin 3 either. The only thing having a day does is make the game send you back to the menu more often. It's such a boring change. Similarly, reducing the max Pikmin limit to 60 is also incredibly boring. The game never feels harder to play, it just makes things take longer. Give me an experience that requires me to properly leverage my full squad. Stop doing this stupid bullshit. The worst part is that with most of the other changes, this probably could have been my favorite feature in the update, but for some reason they just keep fucking ruining it for no reason. God, man. The last big new option is the ability to skip the tutorial. I think you need to have done it before, but I can't seem to find a clear answer one way or the other, and it honestly doesn't matter that much. This is another cool feature for people who want it, but another I probably won't get much use out of. In 2023, when the demo came out, I played it a ton. To be honest, some of the most fun I had with this game was during that month before the game came out. It was really fun testing out different upgrade paths to see the limits of what you could access before they kicked you out. In the process, I had to create a ton of new save files, and pretty early on I had the idea to just make a new save file that was already past the tutorial, and to just copy that one when I wanted to start over. Since data carries over from the demo, on release that file followed me to the full game. I know it's unreasonable, but at this point I am very emotionally attached to the save file. I love having this file that's dated like a month before the game came out. But yeah, overall, cool new feature. I'm glad it exists for the normal people out there who would use it. Onto the new content, they added a new side quest heavily featuring Pikmin Bloom integration, the weird Pokemon Go Pikmin mobile game. This is something else I only just recently got to experience for the first time, and I have to say I liked it a lot. In each map you get 4 hints as to the location of a hidden decor Pikmin. Using the zoomed in screenshots you have to locate and take a picture of each of them. Finding them adds them as permanent members of your squad, assuming you have Pikmin of the corresponding type. On a first playthrough it was fun to find little moments of downtime in my schedule to go hunt for them. I can't imagine it would be all that interesting on future playthroughs though. You can send any decor Pikmin you find to Pikmin Bloom, which is cool I guess, but I still haven't done it. I definitely like this edition overall, especially as a little bit of dumb fun and a free update nobody was expecting. I think one of the most obvious questions Pikmin 4 poses is where does the series go from here? There's so many new ideas here that I think have so much room to grow beyond the extent that they're explored here. I think the biggest thing that they could do that I always think of is just give us more hero units instead of cramming every possible feature into one. Maybe you could have one with high carry limit and another with high damage and another with a stun, and more that can do new stuff like maybe being able to carry several 0 carry limit items at once to have one that's really good at building bridges and stuff. To be clear, I do mean one at a time. Having a bunch of these guys at once would be stupid and create a lot of the same problems. They don't even necessarily have to be different characters, it could even just be different sets of gear for the same guy. Maybe you could even switch them out on the fly at your base. I think there's a lot of room for this idea to be explored in ways that expand on the things I like about it while also sanding down some of the parts that are a little more divisive. I would also love to see the home base concept expanded. I would love it if there was something you could do with your Pikmin here. A couple months ago I got a 3DS and someone who doesn't have my best interest in mind had some game suggestions. I played for a few hours and it was fine. Definitely not something I could ever stomach finishing. The part that stuck with me though is the Pikmin Park. Basically you have a little menu between levels where you can send unused Pikmin on tasks to bring back resources. I would love to see something like this in the full game, and to be honest I think Pikmin 4 already has a perfect place to integrate this. As you progress the story, more area of your base will naturally be cleared out to grant access to more NPCs and quests. Imagine if instead of this happening passively, it was something that you could do with idle Pikmin. It would already be cool to see it implemented that way, but I think they could take it even further. Imagine if you could use your hundreds upon hundreds of idle units to clear room and build new facilities. They could even make a little base builder. If they really are abandoning the tone of the old games, I would at least appreciate it if they fully explored the tone of the new ones. I think that actually gets at the core of the problem with Pikmin 4. It's an identity issue. People often describe this game as a sequel to 2 in the same way that 3 was a sequel to 1, but I don't think that's accurate. Pikmin 4 pulls from every game in the series, including Hey Pikmin. Pikmin 2 is overrepresented because quite simply that game has the most to pull from. Real capital P, capital G Pikmin gamers might wince when they hear this, but Pikmin 4 wants to be this big, for lack of a better word, love letter to the series. At the same time, it also wants to be this big springboard towards something new. These two ideas clash for basically the entire game. It leaves a lot of longtime series fans seeing that love letter as little more than a massive bastardization of the thing that they cherish so deeply. This might sound crazy, but I really do think that they should just double down with it. If you are going to keep making games like this, you need to abandon the earlier ones. I don't know. Maybe they completely retcon Pikmin 4 and start making new sequels that fully respect the games that came before them. I doubt it. I think the best route forward is just to drop the numbered titles and start making entirely new games. I really don't want to end this on a negative note, because I love this game. But as much as I love the complete picture is undeniably a bit botched. In a lot of ways, I feel my feelings for this game are almost as incohesive as the game itself. I love this game almost unconditionally. At the same time, I hate certain parts of it more than I hate a lot of things that probably deserve more attention than a video game. How is it that I find this game so deeply flawed, yet so deeply compelling? I have no choice but to assume that it's because there is something special here. Or maybe I'm just a stupid baby who likes stupid baby games made for stupid babies. Before I go, I want to thank Skitty, both because I mean it and so that I could make them feel bad if they didn't make it this far. This video wouldn't have been possible without them. Both because it was literally made with things that they gave me, and because I don't know if I would have believed that I could do it without them. You are such an inspiration in everything that you do, and I don't know where I would be without you, so thank you. Anyways, I think you're supposed to do like a call to action or whatever in these things, so please subscribe. I want a Fortnite creator code so bad.